Welcome back to another episode of Made Up History to Fall Asleep To. If you're new here, this is your space to relax, unwind, and drift off to stories that never quite happened, but maybe should have. Tonight's episode features two tales, each about 15 minutes long. Let me know in the comments what story length works best for you. I'm still figuring out the perfect balance. Without further ado, let's begin our first story. The city of Pompeii simmered under the weight of late summer. Stone roads shimmered in the heat, and the scent of baked olives and figs clung to the breeze. Merchants called out in the forum, their wares stacked in baskets, silk canopies straining to shield them from the merciless sun. Children darted between colonnades. Life pulsed, full and bright, almost too bright, like the moment before a candle flame gutters out. Velia arrived on foot, her sandals dusty from weeks of travel. Her robes were simple, but the way she moved, slow, deliberate, like a bird listening for danger, made people step aside. She carried nothing but a satchel of herbs and a black iron disc strung on red thread. Her eyes were pale, nearly colourless, as if washed out by prophecy. She settled in the Temple of Venus, not far from the city centre, and spoke little. The priest let her stay out of politeness. She was, after all, just another wandering mystic. The empire produced many, dreamers, fire readers, women with glassy eyes claiming to speak to gods. But within days, people noticed strange things. Dogs refused to enter the temple when she prayed. At night, the temple's oil lamps flickered out in perfect unison. Velia stood beneath a colonnade one dusk, face turned toward Mount Vesuvius, lips parted slightly, as though waiting for something. She claimed the mountain was breathing. Not smoke, she said to anyone who would listen, but breath. Living, slow, each exhale thicker, louder. People laughed uneasily. Vesuvius had always smoked now and then. It was just what mountains did. But Velia was not done. A week later, the water in the city wells began to taste like metal. Horses refused to drink. Some trembled when led near the fountains. Birds flew oddly low, circling and then vanishing inland, away from the sea. Velia sat beneath the temple's portico each morning, mixing ash into her tea. To match what falls from the sky, she explained to a boy who watched her. Rumors spread. People said she woke at night, screaming in a language no one knew. One vendor claimed to see her standing in the amphitheater at midnight, staring straight up at the stars, whispering names not even Roman. The mayor of Pompeii summoned her. Marcus Fabius Rufus, a man of marble baths and rose-scented tunics, sat beneath a fig tree, unimpressed. "You would have us panic," he said coolly, over smoke and tremors. "Pompeii has stood 100 years. The gods guard us." Velia did not flinch. They guard, but they also grow tired. They sent me because they are not yet sure. "Of what?" he asked. "That your city should survive," she answered. Her words found no traction in the governor's mind. He dismissed her, but others began to come. Mothers with sick children, old fishermen, servants who dreamed of fire. One night, Velia left the city alone and climbed partway up the mountain. She found an old cave, covered in moss and brittle vines, and entered without hesitation. Inside, she lit no torch. The glow came from within the stone, faint amber veins running along the walls like lightning frozen in earth. She knelt in silence. The air was thick, and then, from the depths of the mountain, something stirred. It was not a voice. Not exactly. It was like listening to thunder that hadn't quite happened yet. She understood anyway. The fire spirits were waking, Not angry yet, but watchful, testing their hold, wondering if this was a time to be released again, as they had once been in the time before names. Velia returned the next day, her feet bleeding from the walk. She did not rest. She began to carve runes into the temple's floor using a knife made from blackstone. She worked until her hands trembled and her knees went stiff. The priest asked her what she was doing. "Right in the path," she said, "so at least some might escape." 3 days before the eruption, the mountain began to breathe. Not metaphorically, there was a pulse in the air, a rise and fall in pressure that made ears pop and wine spill from cups. Dogs howled at nothing. Chickens stopped laying. The sky took on a pale ochre hue, like the world had been dusted in old parchment. Velia stood in the marketplace, unmoving, as the tremors rippled through the flagstones. Around her, people continued their routines, but quieter now, with darting glances toward the summit. She could feel it in her teeth, a humming buried in her jaw, like a storm being swallowed. That night she painted her face with red clay and placed a crown of fig branches on her head. She sat outside her home and whispered a name older than Rome into the wind. The fire spirits heard. She could feel their flicker behind her eyes. They were curious. A child approached her, little Darius, son of a baker. He had always watched her from a distance, but tonight he stood close. "What do they look like?" he asked. Velia didn't answer at first then. "They look like flame-made flesh, like the shadows fire casts when you close your eyes. Some are tall, some are wide. All of them move like smoke and memory." He blinked at her, unsure whether to be afraid or thrilled. "Are they gonna hurt us?" Velia looked toward the mountain, now pulsing like a sleeping beast. "Only if no one listens." The fire spirits were not cruel, but they were ancient and full of hunger. They stirred beneath the crust of the earth, rolling lazily in molten beds, stretching after a long slumber. They didn't hate the humans above. They barely remembered them. But fire does not ask permission. It consumes. By the time the first rumble split the sky like a growl from the underworld, Velia had already begun the ritual. She stood atop the temple of Jupiter, arms smeared in volcanic ash, chanting a song not sung in 1,000 years. Her voice was steady, but her heart raced. She wasn't just calling to the spirits, she was bargaining with them. Below her, chaos had bloomed. Ash rained like grey snow. People screamed, clutching children and gods, fleeing the city gates. Others fell to their knees, begging Jupiter or Neptune or anyone to wake up and save them. But the mountain didn't care. It roared again, and fire burst into the sky. Velia felt the moment the veil thinned. The fire spirits emerged, glorious searing beings made of ember and heat. They spiraled into the square like a dance of flames, swirling around her with curiosity. "We remember you," one whispered in a tongue that ignited the air. "We remember the pact." "You must spare them," Velia said, her voice trembling now. "They are loud and forgetful, but they are not all cruel. They built over our hearth," another said, coiling around her. "They drained our warmth. They fed the mountain and called it their own." "I am feeding you now," she said, raising her hands, revealing her offering, her own memories, bound in woven hair and resin. "Take this. Take me." The spirits paused. One reached out, not with a hand but with a wave of heat that melted the bronze clasp at her neck. It pressed against her chest, not burning but hot enough to feel like truth. "You would give yourself To calm our fury? It asked. Velia nodded once. The ground split down the main road, carving a black scar through Pompeii. But the spirits held. They folded their fury inward, back into the mountain's core, delaying the eruption by precious moments. Moments that allowed 100 people to escape the city. Not all, not most, but enough. Velia collapsed on the temple steps, smoke curling from her hair. The fire spirits vanished, their hunger sated, for now. As dawn broke over the smouldering ruins, the survivors gathered along the coast. They looked back at a city turned to ash, whispers of the fire spirits still echoing in their hearts. Velia's sacrifice had bought them time, but the mountain's anger was far from spent. Among the refugees, a child clutched a small, glowing ember, a remnant of the fire spirit's presence. They said it was a blessing, a promise that life would rise again from the ashes. The gods had not forgotten Pompeii, and neither had Velia. Centuries later, as archaeologists unearthed the buried city, the ember's faint glow seemed to pulse beneath the stone, a silent reminder of the pact made between mortal and elemental, a story lost to time but never truly forgotten. Thank you for listening to this tale of Pompeii and the fire spirits. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more made-up histories woven with magic and mystery, please leave a comment with your favorite legends or what you want to hear next. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more soothing stories to help you relax and drift off to sleep. Now, close your eyes, rest your head, and drift back to the fog-drenched shores of 16th century England. Our second tale tonight is called The Ghost Fleet that sank the Spanish Armada. They say history remembers the victors, but there are some battles won with the help of things long forgotten, or perhaps not forgotten at all, but buried beneath ocean mist and candlelit folklore. The year was 1588. England stood on a cliff's edge, gazing down at the fury of war. Queen Elizabeth I's court had received word the Spanish Armada was sailing. With more than 100 ships and 20,000 men, King Philip II of Spain intended to crush England and return it to the Catholic fold. It was a holy war and a political siege in one, and the English navy, brave though it was, appeared outmatched. But there were whispers, quiet ones, of other protectors watching England's coasts. Old sailors in Devon pubs spoke of strange galleons seen in the distance, their sails torn, but glowing faintly under moonlight, vanishing before dawn. The fishermen who watched the mist roll in before sunrise said they heard the sound of old Norse chanting on the wind, like lullabies from another age. In the coastal town of Whitby, a young lookout named Elias stood watch each evening, peering across the channel with sharp, quiet eyes. He was barely 20, but had the bearing of a seasoned sailor, even though he'd never left shore. His father, Eric, had captained English ships in his youth and often told him bedtime stories of the sea, except his were darker than most, filled with ghost sails, kraken eyes, and blood-red tides. "Not all those lost at sea find rest, son," he used to say. "Some are given one more voyage." The Armada was sighted near the English Channel on a cool August night. Panic swept through the coast like wildfire. Villages brace, cities fortified, and Queen Elizabeth made her famous speech to the troops at Tilbury. But at sea, the balance looked grim. The Spanish formation was tight and disciplined, row upon row of galleons sailing like a floating wall of iron. Elias had climbed the cliffs outside Whitby with his old spyglass, hoping to glimpse something, anything that would tell him how the tides would turn. As the mist began to curl along the water like smoke, he saw them. At first, just the tops of masts. Then slowly, full ships came into view. Ships that did not match the English fleet. Their hulls were older, their sails aged and weather-beaten, but each moved with unnatural smoothness. One ship passed so near the cliff's edge that Elias saw the figurehead clearly. A carved wolf howling at the moon, its eyes glowing faintly blue. As the vessel coasted through fog, it made no sound, not a creak of wood, nor a flap of canvas. On its deck stood tall, pale figures in Norse armor, some bearing axes, others with rusted swords. One locked eyes with Elias. His skin was drawn, his beard frozen with ice, and then, just as quickly as it had come, the ship vanished back into the mist. Elias ran, not out of fear, but out of calling. His father's stories had mentioned the Frost Guard, Viking warriors who had perished in a failed raid on the English coast 1,000 years ago. Betrayed by their own, their souls cursed to wander the seas until they redeemed themselves in battle. Most had laughed off the tale, but Elias had listened. He remembered every detail. Word soon reached the court. Something strange was happening on the sea. The Armada had met fierce resistance, not just from English fireships, but from something else. Spanish survivors washed ashore days later, terrified, speaking of spectral ships appearing in the fog. They claimed these ghost vessels moved through cannon fire unharmed and rammed Spanish galleons with unholy force. Sailors claimed the water itself turned to ice as these ships passed, and always there was chanting, deep, bone-thick voices calling out in Old Norse, songs of vengeance and valor. Lord Howard of Effingham, commander of the English fleet, had seen them too. He wrote in his personal log, later buried deep in the tower's archives, that the sea mist birthed ships of war, not flown by England, but by Odin's kin. They fight not for queen nor crown, but for judgment and peace. Back in Whitby, Elias was visited in dreams. A vision of a towering Norse captain with eyes like cracked glaciers appeared before him. The captain spoke in a voice that shook the stone around him. "You saw us, boy. That makes you a witness. When the world forgets, you must remind them. The sea never gives back what it takes, unless it has unfinished business." Elias woke each night with sea salt on his skin and frost on the windows, even in midsummer. He began to record what he knew: maps, sketches of ships, faces, names spoken in dream. He documented the tides on the days the ghost fleet appeared. And when he asked the local priest about the lost Viking raiders, the old man turned pale and said, "Those men made a pact with something older than any church. England survived the Armada. The storm scattered the Spanish ships, and many were lost to the sea. But among the common folk, it wasn't the weather they thanked. It was the mist, and the warriors within it." Elias never became a sailor, but he kept his watch every year on the same cliffs, looking for signs of the frostbound fleet. He claimed they would return again, not to destroy, but to protect when the world once again teetered too close to tyranny. Some say he disappeared one winter's night, his coat folded neatly on the cliff's edge, but others say a ship was seen that night, quiet and ghostly, its hull carved with a wolf's howl, and on its deck stood a young man with sharp, quiet eyes, finally taken to sea. Years passed. Whitby's harbour saw ships come and go, fortunes made and lost, wars started and ended. But the story of the ghost fleet remained. In hushed tones around hearths, fishmongers and farmers shared the tale of the frost-bound Vikings who had come to England's aid, not for crown or country, but to settle an oath, made in ice. Elias's journals became local legend. He had written of each ship, descriptions so vivid that artists began sketching them into tapestries, hanging them beside icons of saints and kings. One ship, the Fenrir's Grasp, was said to move like wind even when still. Another, the Northbourne Whale, was so massive that its sails blotted out the moon, and always the same symbol returned, a wolf with a single eye, the rune of vengeance etched on its flank. Historians scoffed, of course. The Spanish Armada had failed because of English naval tactics and a freak storm, they insisted. But even those historians couldn't explain the conflicting Spanish survivor accounts. Why so many spoke of frozen decks, of ancient songs that came from nowhere, or of arrows made of sea glass? Nor could they explain the single Viking axe found lodged in the hull of La Maria de los Remedios, recovered decades later off the Irish coast. But while scholars debated, the people remembered. In 1610, during another sea crisis, when English traders vanished along northern routes, a fisherman named Tomlin claimed to have seen the ghost fleet again. He swore that in the dead of night, as he drifted through thick fog, ships with glowing runes surrounded his small vessel. The lead ship bore a captain in black iron armor, and as they passed, Tomlin heard him speak in perfect English. "Your war is not yet ours." No one believed Tomlin until the wreckage of a notorious pirate crew was found days later, their ships ripped open, not by cannon but by something sharper, cleaner, as if a giant blade had sliced through their hulls. No valuables were taken, only a coin left behind on each deck. Old Norse coins, engraved with the word "skald," meaning debt. In Whitby, Elias's old cottage remained untouched, inherited by no one. Visitors said strange things happened when they stood near it. The temperature dropped, lanterns dimmed, a soft chanting could be heard just beyond the ear's reach. But inside, tucked in a wooden chest beneath the floorboards, were dozens of detailed maps, drawings of wind patterns, coastlines, and mist currents, as if Elias had tried to chart where the ghost fleet would rise next. In 1701, when Queen Anne sought to unify England and Scotland, a new fleet of Spanish ships was spotted again near the western coast. Though no war was officially declared, tension ran high, and that was when reports came from a lighthouse keeper on the Isle of Man. A great horn was heard at sea, deep and echoing, followed by ships of unfamiliar build crossing silently in the dark. He claimed to see one rise from the water, not sail into it, and on board, figures frozen in chainmail, eyes glowing like cold stars. By dawn, the Spanish fleet had turned back. Some now believed the Frost Guard, the cursed Norse captains, had been bound to more than a single battle, that their redemption lay not in one great victory, but in centuries of vigilant protection. They had sworn to defend against tyranny in all forms, whether from throne, crown, or invading fleet, and in return, they would be allowed rest, eventually. But rest had not come. In more recent times, World War II naval officers claimed to see ghostly vessels during North Sea missions, ships not on any radar, yet impossible to ignore. One British destroyer captain noted, in a log later redacted, that an ancient longship appeared during a blackout, keeping pace with their warship, glowing faint blue, then disappearing as quickly as it had arrived. Even in modern times, strange fogs have rolled over the water near Whitby. Fishermen say the sea gets quieter, Birds stop flying, and sometimes if you listen closely, you can hear it. The sound of an oar striking water in perfect rhythm. The whisper of a language not spoken in 1,000 years. Legends don't die, they sail. And somewhere in the cold, rolling deep, the frost god waits, still, watching, listening, and waiting for the next storm worth steering through.